Michael Tucker. Apparently there are a couple of missions here in Toronto, as well as the org. The org has been empty for a few years now, awaiting renovation. Temporary housing is in a couple of offices downtown. I looked on Google Earth to find these missions, and I saw one, a house, and two, a nondescript building. Both had no signs saying Scientology is here. What do these missions do? Okay, the word mission is used in two different ways in Scientology. You have a Sea Org mission, which is a Sea Org thing. It's like a project. You send a couple guys out or a team of people out to go get a specific project done, and that's called a mission. They're on a mission, right? And that would be, maybe analogous to like a Mormon missionary, right? They're called missionaries or missionaries, right? I don't call them missionaries, they call them missionaires in Scientology, right? And they go out on these missions. I did tons of missions when I was in the Sea Org, and I was always really good at them. I got my projects done. But this question is about franchises or missions. They were originally called franchises, which should kind of clue you into what that was all about, right? Franchises or missions are the lowest level Scientology formal organization that in the structure or the hierarchy of Scientology. And there used to be a tremendous network of missions all around the world. Missions were sort of a way of opening up a new territory, right? You'd send a guy in or a bunch of people in. And this isn't a Sea Org thing. This is non-Sea Org members. Just public Scientologists who wanted to open up a new area. You might get a guy who moves up to Montana. There's no Scientology in Montana. And he might move up there and rent out an office space and get permission from the church to use the trademarks of Dianetics and Scientology to deliver lower level Scientology services and auditing up to the state of clear, right? So you have all this auditing that they can deliver if they have an auditor or auditors to do it. And they have classes, and it's lower level classes. They don't train auditors. They do basic courses and beginning courses and things like that up to the sort of level of basic academy services, but not the same thing as what Scientology orgs will deliver, right? The orgs are supposed to be the bigger groups that are supposed to be delivering the real Scientology services and the auditor training and things like that. So missions were really set up to be missions, like they were like Catholic missions, like they'd go out and they would open up new territories. And if the mission was really successful, then it would be eventually, grow up to be an org. Would be an idea that was sort of, I think, the original idea of missions and orgs and whatnot. What happened was in the late 70s, throughout the 70s, these missions in certain areas, like in California, became huge, really successful. They had successful business-oriented people who were running the missions. The people who own the mission charter are called mission holders, and they're the ones who are really in charge of the mission. And they might appoint people or hire people to be executives for their mission, and they might have kind of a hands-off approach, or they could be in there running the thing, rolling up their sleeves and making it happen. Mission holders are the ones who are ultimately responsible for the mission. And so you had a group of very successful mission holders in the Los Angeles area and up in Riverside, up in the Sacramento Bay Area in the 70s, and they were making their missions bigger than the orgs. San Francisco org and the Los Angeles org were these pipsqueak, hole-in-the-wall, awful conditions, horrible places. But the missions were posh and carpeted and painted and nice, and people could come. And I grew up in a Pasadena mission, when I was a kid. So I used to, be a little rugrat running around in them, and there were lots of people in them, and they were doing very well until the early 1980s, when there were a series of mission holder conferences where the Sea Org came in, and basically what happened to the missions is they were all destroyed by the Sea Org and by L. Ron Hubbard, by his orders, because he thought that they were ripping him off, right? The missions are supposed to give 10% of their income straight up to the church, and they were doing that. But they were so successful that they were sort of putting the orgs to shame. and that wasn't appreciated by the Sea Org and by Hubbard. And he thought that, and they were also starting to engage in some kind of shady practices as well. I'm not giving them a pass because they were forming up a credit union and loaning people money so they could do Scientology and this kind of stuff. There were shenanigans on all ends. So the Sea Org came in with a group in the Sea Org at the time called the Finance Police, and they just made the mission holders, under threat of being declared and expelled, they said, you hand over, this much money right now, or you hand over your bank accounts right now, and they just destroyed them. And they declared a bunch of the mission holders as suppressive people, and they sort of cleaned house, but what they really did was destroyed their feeder lines, because these missions were wildly successful, and they were getting a lot of people involved in Scientology. And that's why I think that the 70s and early 80s, before all of this nonsense happened, that was the most successful time of Scientology. There was a later sort of resurgence in the mid to late 80s when Dianetics hit the #1 hit the bestseller list on the New York Times again, and there was a lot of promotion and marketing going on of Scientology in the mid to late 80s. But that got killed off right away because Miscavige just has no real idea of how to do marketing, and doesn't really care to anyway. It's not what he's about. So anyway, getting back to missions, that's what happened with the missions, and that's what missions are. They're low-level service organizations for Scientology.